Hello, night owls. I am Dusky Nights, and I bring you real-life horror stories that will help you sleep, or maybe keep you awake. But before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Also, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Imagine this. You wake up in the dead of night, a cold sweat clinging to your skin. The house is silent, yet you feel it, that presence, the unsettling weight of eyes on you. Though you're alone, the shadows, they seem to stretch, twisting in ways that make your skin crawl. What if I told you that some things aren't just figments of the imagination? Some things are very real, and they're watching, waiting for the moment you make the wrong move. Trust me, what you're about to hear might just make you rethink what's lurking in the dark. I was rinsing off the dust of a long move last month, standing under the warm spray of my new shower when I first heard it. I had just settled into a little house in Pine Hollow, a quiet town tucked into the rolling hills of northern Oregon, where the air smells of pine needles and damp earth. The place is small, maybe a few thousand people, surrounded by thick forests and gravel roads that twist into shadows. After months of bouncing between friends' couches and hauling my life in a rented van, I finally had my own space. A 2-bedroom fixer-upper on the edge of town, snagged for a price so low it felt like a gift. The shower was my refuge, a moment to let the water wash away the ache of unpacking boxes and the stale sweat of borrowed beds. I had always loved that time, alone, shielded from the world, steam curling around me like a protective veil. Living with others, using their bathrooms, left me feeling like a guest who had overstayed, always rushing through, never at ease. This house was different. Mine, paid for with years of savings from my accountant job, a rare win after a string of rented apartments and nosy landlords. I turned the knob, letting the water hit my shoulders, and closed my eyes. Then it came, a faint tap against the wall, sharp and deliberate. At first I thought it was me. The sound was soft, like a knuckle brushing tile, and I figured I had nudged the shower shelf, maybe tipped over the shampoo bottle I had lined up with my soap. I squinted through the steam, scanning the tub, but everything sat where I left it. The tap came again, louder, from behind the wall near the faucet. I froze, water dripping into my eyes, and tilted my head to listen. Pipes, I told myself. Old houses like this have quirks, creaky stairs, rattling windows. A guy at work once mentioned water pressure making pipes knock when it surges too fast, banging against the frame. It fit. A cheap place like this was bound to have flaws. I waited, soap suds sliding down my arms, counting the seconds. Another tap, then silence. I stood there, the spray growing cold, trying to convince myself it was normal. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15, and the sound kept coming. Tap, pause, tap. Like a signal I could not decode. I turned off the water to test it. If it was the pipes, it should stop when the flow did. It did not. Tap, tap, tap. Steady, relentless, like someone testing the wall's give. I grabbed my towel, wrapped it tight, and stepped out. The tiles icy under my feet. That night, lying in bed with the lights off, I heard it again, faint through the floorboards, a whisper from the bathroom above. Weeks slipped by, and the tapping became part of the house. It stuck to a rhythm. Tap, pause, tap, longer pause, like a pulse buried in the walls. I tried to tune it out, throwing myself into making the place mine. The house was a dream otherwise. 2 bedrooms with slanted ceilings, a big kitchen with a window overlooking the pines, a porch where I could sip coffee and watch fog drift through the trees. I hung photos from my old place, stocked the fridge with groceries, set up a desk in the spare room for work. Mornings were quiet, just the hum of the kettle and the rustle of leaves outside. Evenings, I cooked simple meals, pasta, eggs, listening to the forest settle. But the shower turned into a place I avoided. Every time I stepped in, the taps were there, waiting, like they knew I was back. I started timing them, counting the gaps, searching for a pattern to prove it was mechanical, something I could fix. Then, one morning, it shifted. I was lathering my hair, eyes shut against the suds, when the rhythm broke. Tap, 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 quick and uneven, like someone hesitating before a knock. It reminded me of creeping up to a neighbor's door as a kid, scared they would catch me snooping. I rinsed off fast, staring at the wall, and leaned closer. The taps stopped. I pressed my ear to the wet tile, breath held. Nothing. Then, bang! A hard thud shook the wall, knocking the soap dish and bottles to the floor with a crash. I slipped, slamming into the tub's edge, pain flaring through my ribs. The tapping erupted. Tap, 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 tap. Fast and wild, like a dozen hands pounding at once. I scrambled up, grabbed my towel, and ran out, slamming the bathroom door shut. The house did not feel like mine after that. I stopped using the shower, opting instead for quick washes at a gas station 20 minutes down the road, splashing water on my face in a chipped sink while truckers eyed me from the counter. The tapping followed me, not loud, but constant, leaking through the walls day and night. I heard it from the living room while I watched TV, from the kitchen as I chopped vegetables, from the bedroom when I tried to sleep. It was not just the bathroom anymore. It was the whole house, a heartbeat I could not escape. I kept busy, running errands in town, groceries, a new lamp, anything to stay out. Pine Hollow is small, just a general store, a diner, a gas station, all huddled along one main street. People nodded hello but kept their distance, and I liked it that way. One evening, I pulled into the gas station lot, and the cashier, a wiry guy with a stained apron, waved me off before I could step inside. "Can't keep coming here to wash up," he said. "Folks think you're homeless." I drove home, dread pooling in my chest, knowing I had to face it. I needed a real fix, maybe a gym membership for their showers, but that would take days to arrange. For now, I decided to wash in the kitchen sink. I crept upstairs, heart racing, to grab my shampoo and soap from the bathroom. The tapping greeted me as I cracked the door. Tap, 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 steady and patient. I darted in, snatched what I needed, and bolted out, the sound chasing me down the hall. Back in the kitchen, I sat up by the sink, turned on the faucet, and braced for the cold. Then, a scream tore through the drain. High, desperate, a woman's voice. "Where is he? What did you do to him?" I jerked back, cracking my head on the faucet, water splashing across the counter. The voice came again, jagged with panic. "Tell me where he went." It was young, maybe late 20s, raw with grief, echoing up from the pipes like they were a megaphone. I live alone, no neighbors within shouting distance, no one to explain this. My hand shook as I shut off the water, but the tapping upstairs turned into thunder. Bam, 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 like a storm of fists against the bathroom wall. I dropped the shampoo, the bottle rolling under the table, and my feet moved before I could think, dragging me back up the stairs. The hallway stretched too long, the air thick and humid, like the forest had seeped inside. I reached the bathroom door and stopped dead. The wall was shaking. Bam, bam, bam. Hundreds of blows, relentless, like a mob trapped behind it, clawing to break free. The door swung shut on its own, slamming hard. I lunged for the knob, twisting with both hands, but it held fast. Someone was pushing back. A sob came through, soft and close. "You took him, did you not?" The voice was right there, inches away. I yelled, pounded the door, kicked it until my toes bruised. "Let me out." No response. Just the banging, the sobbing, the tapping threading through it all. I slid down, back against the wood, breath ragged, trapped in that room with no escape. The light flickered once, then died, leaving me in a gray haze. I sat there, listening, as the noise swallowed everything else. Days melted into each other. I lost track of how many. The banging never stopped, a constant roar that rattled the walls, the floor, my bones. I tried to wait it out at first, sitting by the door, telling myself someone would notice I was gone. My boss might call when I missed work. A friend might swing by with a six-pack, wondering why I had gone quiet. But my phone showed no signal, no bars, no Wi-Fi, though it worked fine when I moved in, pinging texts to my sister about the house. I checked it every hour, watching the battery tick down, useless in my hand. The bathroom became my prison, a 6x8 box with a sink, a tub, a toilet I avoided looking at. I rationed what I could, squeezing toothpaste onto my tongue when hunger clawed too deep, swallowing it with a grimace. The soap bar sat there, mocking me. I could not stomach the thought of chewing it I dragged the bath mat to the door, piled towels and a spare washcloth into a lumpy bed, and curled up tight, knees to chest. Sleep came in scraps, broken by the noise, by the sensation of something brushing my skin, fingers grazing my arms, my legs, my neck, light and curious. I woke up once with my face against the sink, another time sprawled by the tub, never where I had settled. The light switch quit entirely. No hum, no flicker, just dark that grew thicker each day. One morning I opened my eyes to nothing, pure black, heavy and suffocating. I reached out, fumbling for the wall, and my hand hit something. Cold, bony, skin stretched tight over sharp edges. I gagged, pulling back. Feet shuffled around me, soft and close. Too many, too near. I was not in the bathroom anymore. I shoved forward. Bodies, dozens of them, pressing in tight, cold and silent. Arms brushed mine, hands grazed my shoulders, my hair, my back. I stumbled, tripping over feet that shifted too slow, catching myself on someone's bony frame. The air was damp, thick with a sour stench. Sweat, rot, something alive and decaying at once. The tapping was gone, replaced by a low murmur, whispers overlapping, circling me, too faint to understand. I pushed harder, desperate for a wall, a door, anything solid, but my hands found only more skin, more movement. The woman's voice sliced through, faint and trembling. "You took him, did you not?" It echoed, bouncing off unseen corners, and the bodies closed in tighter, a wall of flesh I could not break. I swung my arms, yelling into the dark, my voice swallowed by the noise. No one answered, just the shuffle, the whispers, the weight of them pressing down. My phone buzzed in my pocket, battery at 1%, screen flickering as I pulled it out. I typed this, hands trembling, not knowing if it will send through the dead signal. The murmurs grew louder, footsteps circling closer, a slow, deliberate dance. I feel them watching, waiting, their touch growing bolder, fingers tracing my ribs, my spine, my face. I am still here, still breathing, but I am not me anymore. Do not come for me. Whatever this is, it is smarter, stronger, and it will take you too. The screen dims as I finish, the whispers rising, and something cold wraps around my wrist. When I was growing up, my grandmother had one strict rule at the dinner table. Always leave one bite on your plate. It wasn't just a passing suggestion. It was a command, one that couldn't be questioned. No matter how hungry we were, no matter how much we loved the food in front of us, there had to be one bite left. My brothers and I used to look at each other in confusion, while our parents silently obeyed the rule without question. It didn't make sense to us at first. Why leave food behind when there was so much of it? It didn't matter what kind of food we were eating. Rice, soup, fish, or even just a piece of bread. if it was on the table, we always had to leave one bite, one fragment of whatever it was, still on the plate. If we didn't, we were told that something bad would happen. It was a rule that governed every meal in our house. I remember the first time I asked her about it. I was only 8 years old, and, like most children, I was incredibly inquisitive. I wanted to understand why things were the way they were. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table in her dimly lit house, I picked up my plate and, noticing there was a single piece of bread left, was about to finish it off. I looked up at her, my small hands still gripping the plate, and asked, "Grandma, why do we have to leave one bite? It's just bread. Why not finish it?" She paused, her wrinkled fingers tightening around her spoon. I could see something flash in her eyes, something almost fearful. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked out the window toward the dark, stretching shadows beyond the house. The wind outside howled softly, brushing against the old wood like a distant whisper. "You must always leave something behind," she said finally, her voice low and almost a whisper. There was a tremor in her words, a subtle tension in the air around us. "Or he will think you're inviting him in." I blinked, confused. "Who's he?" I asked, pushing forward with my questions. But Grandma didn't answer. Instead, she tightened her grip on the spoon, her eyes scanning the darkness outside. She didn't even seem to notice when I asked again, "Who is he?" Her silence hung heavy in the air. I pressed her for more, but she refused to explain. She looked at me with an almost pleading expression, like she was trying to hide something. It wasn't like her to be cryptic. She was usually so open with me. But this was different. I assumed he must be just some mythical monster, like the stories we'd heard about the Aswang or the Manananggal. Folklore creatures meant to scare children and keep them in line. But even as I thought this, I noticed my parents following the same rule. Even my father, who never believed in ghost stories or myths, always made sure to leave that last bite behind, no matter how hungry he was. It didn't make sense to me, but I followed the rule without questioning it. As the years passed, the rule became ingrained in me. I obeyed it without hesitation, just as my parents had, just as my grandmother had. It became a part of daily life, something we did without thinking. Every time we sat down at the table, we left that one last bite, as if some invisible force was watching us, waiting for us to make the right choice. But as I grew older, I started to forget. Life got busy. I moved to the city, away from the quiet countryside where I had grown up. I lived alone now, in a small apartment. My work consumed most of my time, and the little rituals from my childhood became distant memories. They no longer seemed important. But one evening last week, everything changed. It had been one of those long, draining days. I was exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open as I stumbled through the door of my apartment. The city was alive outside, loud with the hum of traffic and the distant sounds of people arguing, laughing, or shouting. But none of it mattered. I was too tired to care. All I wanted was to eat and sleep. I didn't bother cooking. I just microwaved some leftover chicken and rice and plopped down on the couch, eating in front of the TV. I didn't even taste the food. It was all a blur, just a way to fuel myself for the next day. The minutes ticked by, and before I realized it, I had finished everything on my plate. And then something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of thing that would make someone scream or panic, but it was a subtle change, a wrongness in the air, something cold and crawling along my spine, settling deep in my chest. It was like a shift in the atmosphere, an unsettling sensation I couldn't shake. I didn't know what it was, but it felt like something was watching me. I laughed it off. I'm just tired, I thought. It's nothing. I'm just being ridiculous. But deep down, I knew better. I felt the weight of it. Something wasn't right. I cleaned up my plate, brushed my teeth, and tried to go to bed, pushing the unease aside. I pulled the covers up and closed my eyes, hoping sleep would come easily, but it didn't. At 3:12 a.m., I woke to a sound. At first, it was soft, barely noticeable, just a faint scraping, a quiet clinking. It was so subtle, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just the wind or the house settling. But then it grew louder, metal clinking against porcelain, like silverware tapping against a plate. My heart began to race, my stomach tightening. The noise was coming from the kitchen. I sat up in bed, my breath catching in my throat. It's nothing. It's just the house settling, I tried to convince myself. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew that sound. I'd heard it before. I slid out of bed, my feet touching the cold floor. The apartment felt wrong, colder than it should be. I walked cautiously toward the kitchen, each step feeling heavier than the last, like the air itself was pressing against me. When I reached the kitchen doorway, I hesitated. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see what was waiting in there, what I knew I'd find. But something compelled me. I had to. I peered inside. There, on the counter, was my plate, the one I had eaten from hours ago, the very same one I had washed and put away. But now, it was sitting on the counter as if someone had placed it there. And in the center of the plate, there was something else. A single bite of food, a bite of chicken, just a small piece. I hadn't put it there. I stood frozen, staring at the plate, my blood running cold. I turned toward the front door, checking the locks. Everything was still in place. The windows were shut tight. The apartment was empty, just as I had left it. But then I heard it, the sound of chewing. It was wet, sloppy, and slow. It was the sound of someone eating, gnawing on something, their teeth grinding. And it was coming from the kitchen. I froze. My heart thudded in my chest, panic rising in my throat. Someone's here, I thought. My eyes frantically searched the room, but there was no one, nothing, just the empty apartment. I turned, desperately trying to reason with myself. It's all in your head. You're tired. Your mind is playing tricks on you. But the feeling was too strong. The air was thick, oppressive. My instincts told me that something was wrong, deeply wrong. Then I heard it again, breathing, hot, damp breath against the back of my neck. I spun around so quickly that I nearly tripped. But again there was nothing. No one was there. Just emptiness. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, frozen, my heart racing. It's just your mind. It's all in your head. But the air was growing thicker. The shadows seemed to stretch and lengthen in the corners of the room, reaching toward me, alive in ways that didn't make sense. The temperature dropped, and then the smell hit me. Rotting meat, decay. It was so foul, so overwhelming, that I almost gagged. I tried to cover my nose, but it was no use. The stench filled my lungs, suffocating me, choking me. And then I heard it. A voice, low, whispering right beside my ear. You forgot my share. The voice vibrated through my skull, and I could feel it deep in my bones. It wasn't just in my head. It was real. The room seemed to close in on me, the air growing thicker, heavier. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then I felt it. Pressure. A sickening weight in my stomach. Something inside me pulling, twisting. Fingers. Long, cold fingers. Jagged, yellowed. They were inside me. Not cutting, but pulling, yanking something important out of me. Warmth spilled down my legs. I couldn't breathe. I choked, my vision blurring. I tried to scream, but no sound came. The fingers twisted, pulling, yanking something loose, something that shouldn't be taken. I collapsed. My head hit the floor, and the world went black. When I woke up, I was back in my bed. The sunlight was coming through the window, peaceful and calm. My chest was rising and falling in rapid gasps, and I felt drenched in sweat. I touched my stomach. No blood, no wounds. Everything was normal. Just a dream, I told myself. Just a horrible, twisted nightmare. But as I got out of bed, something felt wrong. Weak, empty, like something had been taken from me. I walked to the kitchen, hoping a glass of water would clear my head. I needed to focus, to think. But when I reached the kitchen, I froze. My plate was still there, on the counter, and in the center of it, the single bite of food. The air in the apartment felt thick, and then I heard it again, a wet, horrible chuckle. Behind me, a voice whispered right in my ear, "You should have left me more." I'm not sure where else to put this, so I'll write it here. Honestly, posting something like this feels so exposed. But at this point, I have nowhere else to turn. And maybe, just maybe, someone here can help me understand what's happening. Or maybe I just need to get this out before I lose my grip entirely. My name is Leo. About 8 months ago, a drunk driver ran a red light and T-boned my car. I woke up in a hospital bed, surrounded by darkness and silence. I couldn't see anything. They told me the accident caused permanent damage to my optic nerves, total blindness. I remember my wife, Clara, sitting beside me in the passenger seat. She didn't make it. The doctors tell you recovery is a marathon, a long, painful process of learning to navigate the world again using sound, touch, and memory. I moved back into our apartment because, well, familiarity was supposed to be my ally. The orientation and mobility instructor kept telling me, know your space. Every floorboard creak, the hum of the fridge, the gurgling of pipes in the walls, the 17 steps from the bed to the bathroom, the 12 from my armchair to the kitchen. These things were supposed to be my landmarks, my anchors in the dark. The first few months were a struggle, grief, frustration, and a learning curve that felt like a nightmare. But it made sense. It was hard, but it was a kind of hardship I understood. My apartment was the one place where I still felt some control, some semblance of normalcy. But then, about a month ago, that control began to slip. Not all at once. No, it was gradual, subtle, like small things shifting out of place. I started questioning my senses, my grip on reality. And now, I'm not so sure what's real anymore. It all started with the sounds. I know it sounds crazy, but they were wrong. It wasn't anything dramatic. No bangs or ghostly wails. No, it was subtle. I'd be walking down the hallway, expecting the usual click-clack of my cane or my shoes, and suddenly, for a step or two, it would be thud-thud, muffled, like walking on a thick rug. I'd stop, tap my foot, and it would go back to normal. Click-clack. I'd reach down, feel the floor. Smooth, cold wood, no rug, nothing. Then I'd take another step, and there it was again. Thud. Panic would crawl up my chest, and I'd stand there, frozen, straining to understand why the sound of my own footsteps seemed to change mid-stride. It didn't end there. The fridge hum, that constant low drone that we all tune out. It started cutting out. I'd be in the living room, listening to an audio book, and suddenly it would be quiet. Not just quiet, but an oppressive silence. I'd walk the 12 steps to the kitchen, and as soon as I'd step into the threshold, or sometimes just when my hand touched the fridge, the hum would fade back in. At first, it was soft, then back to normal. It felt like the fridge had been holding its breath, waiting for me to approach. I tried to explain it away. Stress, auditory hallucinations, phantom sensations from a brain rewiring itself after trauma. I clung to those explanations. I wanted them to be true. But then the cold spots started. My apartment's old, drafty. I know where the drafts are. Under the front door, the leaky window seal in the living room. But these were different. A sudden chill, brushing my cheek in the middle of the hallway, far from any source of cold. A pocket of icy air lingering by my armchair for a second, like someone had just walked past. I'd spin around, instinctively listening for footsteps, but there was nothing. The usual apartment sounds, the distant hum of the city, but that feeling of displaced air, of presence, lingered, and it was enough to make my stomach turn. The worst part of it, though, is the spatial distortion. This is hard to explain. If you can see, my world is built on a mental map. Sound echoes, textures, muscle memory. I know where things are, or at least I used to. But now, the map is unreliable. I'd reach for the wall beside my bed, the same wall I've touched every single morning for months. My hand would travel further than it should, just an inch or two, but my stomach would plummet. The wall felt like it had receded. I tap it, solid plaster beneath my fingers, but the distance felt wrong. Minutes later, I might walk toward the kitchen doorway, counting my steps, expecting the frame to be right in front of me. But I'd bump into it a step early, like the apartment itself was shifting, changing size, playing tricks with my perception. I can't confirm it, and yet I can feel it. The sounds kept escalating too. They went from misplaced to almost impossible. One morning, making tea, I heard the gas stove click, whoosh, the sound of the flame igniting, clear as day. But it sounded like it came from the bedroom closet. I froze, kettle heavy in my hand, turned toward the sound, expecting to find something or someone there. But there was nothing, just silence. I turned back, hesitantly reached for the stove, and felt the heat radiating from it. It was on. The sound had just come from the wrong place. The shower, too. It started sounding like it was directly overhead, from the living room ceiling. Each time I'd investigate, only to find everything normal, the sound returning to its usual source as soon as I got close. It felt like auditory gaslighting, a prank my mind was playing on me. Who can see when you hear something weird? You look, you scan, identify, rationalize. Maybe the cat knocked something over, or the wind rattled the blinds. Whatever. You verify. I can't. I hear the impossible, feel the impossible, and I'm left standing in the dark. My remaining senses give me contradictory, terrifying information about the one place I should know best, my own damn home. I talked to my friend Sarah about it. She's great, really supportive, but she's a logical thinker. Stress, grief, PTSD. Maybe talk to your doctor, Leo. Check your meds, she suggested, her voice calm and reassuring. She means well, but how do you explain the sensation that the very geometry of the apartment is fraying at the edges? That silence feels intentional. Then, last week it happened. Lying in bed, trying to fall asleep in the too quiet apartment, I heard it. A sound. Faint, slow, rhythmic, and so close. It wasn't my breath. I was holding mine, listening, not the wind. It was deliberate, and it sounded dry, papery, like old leaves crushed in a hand. I couldn't stand it. I lashed out blindly where the sound was. My hand sliced through empty air. The breathing stopped. Silence slammed back in. But the air my hand had passed through, it was colder than the rest of the room. I sat up in bed, heart racing, wondering what was happening. After that, the cold spots became more frequent. On my neck while I was listening to headphones, I'd rip the buds out, heart hammering, but the coldness would remain. Silence. Just silence. The whispers started then. Faint, sibilant sounds, like someone speaking from inches away. Sometimes just formless. Other times, my name. Leo. Once, while Sarah was visiting, making tea in the kitchen, I heard it again, right beside my armchair. "Sarah?" I called out, voice tight. "No, honey. Just putting the kettle on," she responded, cheerful from the kitchen. The whisper vanished. That visit, Sarah gently brought up the anniversary of the accident. "Clara, I know this time of year must be hard," she said, her hand briefly resting on my arm. I flinched inside. "I'm managing," I lied, trying to push it down. "This apartment stuff is just weird." That night, I did what I promised myself I wouldn't do. I left my phone recording. I wanted proof. I needed it. When I played the recording back, navigating the audio with voiceover, I heard it. The breathing, faint, papery. And just before it faded, a click, soft, sharp, like a fingernail tapping the phone's microphone. Something close enough to touch my phone while I slept. As the anniversary of the accident approached, the spatial shifts grew worse. Reaching for doorknobs and finding empty air, bumping into furniture that felt like it lunged into my path. The whispers grew bolder, sometimes echoing Clara's voice. The breathing, it felt constant now, like a background hum of dry decay. The day of the anniversary, everything hit me with a horrifying clarity. I sat in my armchair, the 12 steps to the kitchen feeling like miles. The 17 steps to the bedroom impossible. And I finally let myself think about Clara, about the crash, about everything. I remembered the sticky fridge handle, the way she always had to jiggle just so, and that's when I realized the wrongness I'd been feeling wasn't just spatial shifts. It was like I was catching fragments of her presence in the air, in the cold spots, the muffled footsteps near the closet where she kept her slippers, her shiver in the chair, and the breathing, that dry, papery sound. It wasn't a monster. It was the sound of my wife dying, burned into my auditory memory, now projected onto my apartment by a mind drowning in trauma. I sat there, in the armchair, and I broke. I cried until I was empty, the sounds of my sobbing loud in the heavy silence. I'd been living in an echo of my own grief. Things have calmed down since then. The fear is quieter, but it's still here. The clicks, the cold spots, the whispers, but now I understand. They're not haunting me. I'm haunting me. My own grief, warping reality, making everything feel wrong. I still hear the breathing sometimes, but it feels different now, more like a memory than a presence. I'm trying to move on, but sometimes, in the silence of my apartment, the whispers still call my name. I found him after a storm. As a kid, I loved searching our pool for creatures the sea had swept in. Grammy's house, an ancient beach house built on the edge of the shore, was where I spent every summer. But in Florida, storm season never really ends. I grew used to waking up every morning, running outside barefoot, where the sea still lapped at my ankles. I spent hours sifting through the debris-littered pool with my dollar store fishnet, searching for sea creatures. One time I thought I found something. Kneeling on the edge of the pool, I peered into the glassy surface, speckled with dirt and leaves. Movement under the stillness sent me stumbling back, dropping my net. Upon closer inspection, though, it was just an old plank of wood. I was awkwardly poking at it when the surface exploded, drenching me. For a split second, I felt a rush of excitement. Fish. Until the fish started laughing. Roman, the boy from across the street, the one who could hold his breath far longer than normal humans, was infamous for lurking in Grammy's pool. He claimed he was doing research, but I never knew what for. Roman was a weird kid. He reminded me of a fish. His eyes were too big, too far apart, and I swore his nose grew an inch every day. Sopping wet, he hauled himself out of the pool and slumped beside me, his dark blonde hair plastered over his eyes. Roman prodded me. He was always prodding me to get my attention, and it drove me insane. "What you looking for?" he asked. "Fish," I answered. He laughed, kicking his feet in the water. "Me too. Do you want me to help you find some?" I told him to go away, but Roman was allergic to the word no. He turned to me, blowing soaking strands of curls out of his eyes. "Okay, so can I watch you?" Roman nudged me, and I almost lost my balance. I had a feeling he had been eavesdropping over our broken fence. Before I could call my parents, he slipped back into the water. Roman wasn't a boy to trust. I accidentally told him I peed in the sea once, and by the next day, the entire class was calling me names. So I would have preferred to search for marine life without him lurking around. I found all kinds of things in our pool: starfish, the occasional jellyfish, and even a baby shark my mom had to rescue with a fishing net. But I never found what I was truly looking for, what Grammy had searched for and ultimately given up on, and what Roman was catching on to. Fish people, stay with me. Okay, so you should know my Grammy wasn't fully there after being diagnosed with an aggressive form of Alzheimer's. But she was also very intelligent. For the most part, she was bedridden by the time I started elementary school. But the stories she used to tell me when she was awake kept me visiting, even when I knew deep down that I didn't want to watch her deteriorate. Her stories of encounters with fish people were worth it, worth the pain of staying by her side. I remember my 10th birthday. The power went out right in the middle of my favorite episode of Hannah Montana. Grammy was sleeping on the couch, tucked under blankets, and I was inhaling my ice cream birthday cake. When the storm blew out the TV, I abandoned my snack, remembering Mom's instructions in case a hurricane hit. I grabbed my flashlight, 2 bottles of water, snacks, and her meds, and helped Grammy down into the basement to wait it out. I was used to her staying silent, just sitting with her arms wrapped around her knees, her expression content. She was starting to forget my name. Some days, I was Charlotte, then I was Charlie, and then I was a stranger. But this wasn't one of those times. Grammy smiled at me, patted the space next to her, and said, "Can I tell you about the fish people, Charlotte?" Grammy didn't usually talk to me. It wasn't that she didn't want to. It was more that she couldn't. Mom explained it the best way she could. Blunt and realistic. I would have to come to terms with Grammy forgetting me. I didn't understand Alzheimer's, but I did understand the concept of forgetting. Grammy's smile softened as she began her story. "I met him when I was your age," she said, reminiscing. "A beautiful boy from the sea, and I was going to marry him." She laughed, and it was a good laugh. It was Grammy's laugh. "He asked me to be his queen, and we were going to run away together to his home under the ocean." Her voice grew somber, her unfocused eyes finding mine. "When a magical boy promises to take you to a whole other world and promises marriage, what else is there to say except yes?" I found myself smiling, comforted by her words, her effortless way of storytelling. I jumped up to grab my flashlight, holding it underneath my chin as Grammy continued. "His name was Sebastian," she murmured. "Such a beautiful man. His hair reminded me of seaweed, tangled and curling perfectly over eyes, the color of stardust." I was fully invested in the story. "Did he have a tail?" I asked. Grammy grinned, her expression warm and filled with nostalgia. "He did," she whispered. "I wanted to tell my friends, but he was very clear." She mimicked his voice, holding up her finger. "Clementine, you must promise me you will never reveal my secret to anyone." Grammy found my gaze, her smile softening. "I kept that promise. We made arrangements to run away together. He told me to meet him in the shallows at dawn, underneath the sunrise. And I waited." Her tone, which had been so chipper, so happy, like she was reliving the memory, grew darker. "I waited for him, sitting on the sand, my toes in the shallows, until sunrise turned to sunset." Her expression crumpled like she was going to cry. "I waited. I never stopped waiting. Every day I would step into the shallows and wait for him to come back. Even when I was unrecognizable to him, when I had aged beyond what he knew." Grammy's smile was soft. "I want to die under the sea," she whispered, grasping for my hands. "So I can find him, because I belong to the ocean, Charlotte." Her fingernails bit into my skin, her eyes losing clarity. "Can you help me find him?" As a 10-year-old, I was convinced I could find Sebastian for her. I stood in the shallows every morning for hours, calling out for him, I stupidly thought that if I told the sea my Grammy was sick, he would hear and come back. When I was starting middle school, Roman came over to ask my dad for spare fishing gear. Grammy's face lit up, her eyes widening. Sitting in her chair, she nearly toppled off. After not speaking for days or weeks, she was laughing. She thought he was Sebastian, pointing at him with frenzied eyes and laughing, saying, "You haven't changed. Sebastian, you're here." Roman left pretty quickly, shooting me a look before leaving. It became increasingly obvious I wasn't going to find Sebastian. I had this fantasy of taking my Grammy in her wheelchair all the way to the shore. The two of them would talk, and maybe he really could take her back to his world. But that was fiction. The reality was that I was losing my grandma to a disease with zero mercy, and instead of coming to terms with it, I hid in fantasy. Eventually, Mom told me as gently as possible that Grammy had deteriorated. As her disease progressed and reached the later stages, she insisted she could breathe underwater. That's what killed her. One day, Grammy waded into the ocean during a trip to the beach and never resurfaced. Mom and Dad were upset, but I was relieved. Grammy never wanted to die on land, so she had gotten what she wanted. Maybe I was still holding on to the possibility that Sebastian kept his promise. She left me the house, as well as letters to Sebastian she never threw into the ocean. So, during college, I spent every weekend there, dropping a letter a day into the surf. However, the house wasn't just mine. I was in class when I got a text from my favorite person. "I'm not cleaning the pool." In her will, to my confusion, my grandma had named Roman, yes, the weird fish-looking kid, as a co-owner of the house once we both turned 18. I thought it was a mistake, and so did my parents. But no, my grandma was very clear, naming him specifically, because he just happened to resemble Sebastian. Dad was pissed, and he had every right to be. Roman wasn't even an acquaintance. If you have ever felt a haunted home turn against you, heard eerie noises that won't quit, or faced an unseen presence you can't outrun, send your story to duskynights43@gmail.com. I share new tales every Monday till Thursday if I make it out to post them, so subscribe if you want to stay in the loop. Keeps me chasing these trapped in terror moments, the mysterious disturbances, the claustrophobic nightmares, and the unrelenting fear they leave behind. I am stuck here, surrounded with no way out, the psychological isolation eating me alive. If you have got something to share, do it fast. I do not know how long this battery will hold. Stay away from this place. Some houses hold more than you can fight, and this one is not letting go.